A local group trying to get its hands on a tugboat from World War II that was built right here in Central Florida.
The problem is, it's all the way over in Europe. Fox 35 Sydney Cameron shows us how they plan to get it back here to Florida.
It's our holy grail. It's that rare.
It's this World War II tugboat built in West Volusia County in 1944, then given to the U.S. Army and believed to be used at the D-Day invasion of Normandy.
Discovered half a dozen still existed around the world, and yet this is the only one that still has the original engine, and the original superstructure is largely intact.
But it's stuck nearly 5,000 miles away in Sweden, says history buff Daniel Friend. A couple owns it, but because of the pandemic, they're looking to part with it. Now Friend, who's president of the nonprofit DeLand Historic Trust Incorporated, wants to bring ST-479 home after 77 years.
This is the last of only 29 tugboats built on Lake Beresford during World War II by people in West Volusia and the DeLand area.
The U.S. Army used tugboats built on U.S. coastal towns during World War II to move loads all over the world. If the nonprofit can get the tugboat to make the voyage from Sweden to Volusia County, they want to put it along the St. Johns River, either at Edstone Park or here at Lake Monroe Park. It will be part of a World War II monument to honor the 44 West Volusia service members killed during World War II.
We're getting strong donations from the community. We need more. We need corporate support.
If the nonprofit can't reach its goal, Friend says they will return any check donations over $100, but he's hoping he won't have to. Sydney Cameron, Fox 35 News.
This is ST-479 Tiger, built in DeLand in the spring of 1944, and then shipped over in time for the D-Day invasion of Normandy. She's in Stockholm, Sweden, waiting for us to bring her back. She's been donated, but it's going to cost quite a bit to have her returned, and we need your help. We've raised about $30,000 in the bank or with promises. Can you help us now? Pass the word, talk to people about how important this is to have the last highly original U.S. Army small tugboat built on Lake Beresford, returned home finally. Give me a call.
Tonight's guest speaker is Dan Friend. Let me give you just a little bit of bio about him. Dan is a native of DeLand. He is a Vietnam-era veteran, and he's a retired history teacher from DeLand High School. He's also the president of the DeLand Army Tugboat Preservation Group Incorporation.
Thank you, Melissa. my job to keep you awake tonight. If I see you dozing off, I'll stop and yell at you. That's what teachers do. Actually, it's a pleasure to be here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, talking about tugboats. And history in general is one of my favorite things. I enjoyed teaching for 15 years. I did communications, but I also did a lot of history. So, we're going to jump right into it. I've got a lot to cover tonight. I'm going to do my best to make it interesting and entertaining. If you can try to hold your questions to the end, that way everyone can participate, and I'll move as quickly as I can through this presentation. But it's a lot. At some point, I may stop when I see people starting to fade, and I've been there, and I have to stand up and stretch a little bit. I always did that with the kids about halfway through the class, because they would fade after 10 minutes. You know, whatever. All right, stop, stretch. All right, we'll continue on. So, tugboats. Well, I had read the history of the DeLand tugboats that were built on Lake Beresford in what was known as Beresford, Florida, way back in the 80s. And I knew pretty much what had happened in the construction. We built 29 United States Army tugboats on Lake Beresford, out of all steel. And this construction started right after Pearl Harbor. Literally, the whole country became geared up. We've got to win the war, we've been attacked. And all the stuff in the pacifist viewpoints that had been there earlier went away. DeLand got involved. We had the DeLand Naval Air Station, which opened up very quickly. There were gliders, Waco gliders, built in DeLand. And then there were the tugboats. Now you might ask yourself, tugboats on Lake Beresford? Well, they had some problems. I'm going to talk about the issues they faced in getting this done. But they did get it done. And 29 of them came out of there and down the St. Johns. I know we're headed north, but it's down the St. Johns because it flows north. Down the St. Johns to Jacksonville, where at that point the history stopped. There was no history after that for any of these tugboats. Well, when I was retired, I went to City DeLand and kicked around an antique shop with a buddy I knew. I walked up and said, "What is that?" "Oh, that's a bronze plaque. I think it's off the old Whitehair Bridge out there." And I read it, 1944, ST 679. Wait a minute. Whitehair Bridge wasn't built till 1951. I know what that's from. I said, "How much you want for this bridge plaque?" $150. Here I go. I didn't even quibble with the guy. He's a friend anyway. Gave him $150, went home and looked at it and said, "This is a builder's plaque for a tugboat that was built on Lake Beresford, without a doubt." And the more I thought about it, I said, I wonder if I could do research online and find out something. Oh, I sure did. Found out a lot of stuff. And it has grown exponentially since that time. In fact, about once a month, I'll do a presentation somewhere in Volusia County. About half of them are over here. Before I go any further, I want to point out that the Vice President of the Land Army Preservation, I have to say it all at once, the Land Army Tugboat Preservation Group, Inc., is here tonight. Joe Vetter, my colleague, stand up please. I'm sure a lot of folks know you. Joe is from this part of the world, and I was picking on some people earlier about the East-West divide. I come over here all the time. Most of the folks over there go, "Oh, that's Daytona, who cares?" Just the way it is. Every once in a while they grow up. But I'm pleased to be here, and I'm glad Joe could make it, and I'm glad all of you could come out. I'll try not to bore you. All right, so I find this plaque. Then I find out some information about it. Then I find one website that led me to another website, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, there's all kinds of history here. So I found enough to start writing stories in the News Journal and the Beacon, our West Volusia Beacon over there. And we found 3 of the people that had worked there. They had all the stories about, they had worked there as a kid or been there as a kid. So the history started to build up. And it kind of died off for a while. We invited them for a presentation and gave them some presentation awards. And it kind of settled down for a little while. And then I found out even more things. And I'm going to start I'm telling you those right now. This is our board of directors. The dog is our MVP. But this is our group of people. And I wish we had some young people involved, but I found from teaching history that about one child out of 100 could care. And you know, when I was that age, I read voraciously, but I'm still involved with all the other things the kids thought about back then. Sex, etc., that kind of stuff. So, you know, the 1 out of 100 that was interested that I taught, I really appreciated it. It made my day to have them say something like, wow, I didn't know that. That was really neat. There were actually 42 total, but not all of them were built during World War II. 29 were actually built during the war, of 2 different types. But of those 29, I have verified without a doubt that 16 of them went to Europe and fought in the war. They're actively involved. Wow, over half of them went over there. That was an amazing thing to verify. We call these war tugs. I'll give you a little bit of detail about that in a minute. 3 of them were in progress on VJ Day, and they were finished up. They were definitely started during World War II, but they were too late to go. Keep in mind that towards the end of World War II, everyone except the very, very top people had no clue but that we were going to have to invade Japan. So everyone was still producing things. After VJ Day, oh, well, okay. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, oh, well, it's over. And everyone shifted out of wartime production. Then, there were 10 other tugs built in 1952, 1953. And that's a story unto itself. I'm going to go through it. I'll try not to bore you. But as it turns out, 4 of those 10 ended up in Vietnam. So this is more than World War II. This is Lake Beresford today. If we have a drought, you can walk across it. It's gorgeous, but shallow. This is probably the only remaining building from the World War II era of the American Manufacturing Corps Marine Division. This is what it was called at the time. It might be later. It's not the same configuration. Some architectural features have been changed, but I think this might be an original building. Possibly one other, but there's a lot of doubt about that. I think it's been rebuilt. All right, here's the history stuff. The first tugboats are under construction down on the lake. This is the earliest known photo that we have, and it's from May of 1942. Wow, just a few months after Pearl Harbor, we were building tugboats over there. This is, quite literally, the only known photo of the spark plug, the man in charge of the AMC, and later on, the Olson Corporation. Amazingly enough, his name is Olson. What does BD stand for? I haven't a clue. Can't find out. I do have the one picture. He's a gentleman in the middle with a white shirt at the most important ceremony he would ever be at. This is where the United States Army came in and gave the factory the coveted E Award for excellence. It was given to the top 5% of contractors in the country. And that's his car out front. And I've been told, and this is informally, and I never said this, it was used quite often to go get liquor. I don't care, he built great machines, okay? This is a picture of the area. This is actually a quick look inside of the first of the tugs. They were built to something called Design 257. The first 11 Beresford boats built to this design. And you'll notice, and see if this works. Oh goodness. This engine's pretty big. Takes up a lot of room. And actually, they actually had space for seamen and a galley in the front, and they had fore and aft trimming tanks where you could put water in the, and I'm not a boat guy, so those of you that are, bear with me. I'm a landlubber, so I not only swim well. What I've learned about boats and tugs I've learned in the last 3 years. So, make a note, correct me later. All right, so this is what the first 7 looked like. They're 74 feet long with a 400 horsepower diesel, state of the art at the time. They were also never designed to go out in the ocean. They were harbor tugs. Day tugs. Get on your day boat, work, go home at night. What they were really designed for. This is inside the engine area. Obviously the engine's not there, and you can see the amount of space it took. The kitchen area, the galley, the wheelhouse or pilot house. Traditional tug look, right? Old-fashioned wood steering wheel. This is about the only wood that was there. The tugs were built out of all steel. They did it because it was cheap, relatively, and quick. To build one out of all wood took different skill set and more time. They wanted them quickly. We want them now. How did the U.S. Army small harbor tugs get to Europe? At first, and I was surprised by this, they put them on Liberty ships, or Victory ships. I think the Liberties came first. Correct? Okay, thank you. I knew somebody would know. And there they are, two of them, at the very rear of the boat. Had to put two, keep it stable. I guess they could have gone one, but if they, they could get two back there. Is it possible some tugs were lost as these ships were sunk by U-boats in 42 and 43? Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Now, how did they get them on the ships? Here is World War I battleship Kearsarge turned into crane ship number 1. This was in New York. Picked them up, put them on the back of the boat, off they went. Nice plan, right? Well, didn't last. So let's start out and talk about these. The tugboat numbers were not sequential. If you had a batch ready to go, the Army would assign a number, ST, whatever. ST was small tug, makes sense. So what was an LT? Large tug. You guys are good. All right. I had to laugh since I'm a little bit now more familiar with naval tug designations. They had a YTB tug, yard tug big. They had a YTM, yard tug middle. And they had a YTL, yard tug little. Little? You're calling your tug little? Okay, but that's the Navy for you. And don't let me pick on you Navy folks. Okay? More than normal. All right. The first 4 tugboats were called Taylor, Thatcher, Thornton, and Tuther. Tuther, I asked one of the old timers, where did that come from? Well, we had Taylor, Thatcher, Thornton, and the Tuther one. All right. Construction began spring of 1942, design 257. We've gone through that. They were all built completely in steel, except for a little bit of interior trim. Really suitable only for harbor use. Can't say that enough. They were never designed for anything else. Why is that important? You'll hear it. First boat's getting finished up. This is probably ST-40, the first one of the batch. Now here's the launch date, September 7, 1942. So, very quickly, 8 months later, we're kicking these things out over there. This is a big deal and delightful to land at this time. It really is. So, we had to launch them sideways. Remember the shallow lake problem? If we launched them in from the bow, we would have been digging them out. So they went in sideways. Here's the Taylor after launch, and I found a picture of Taylor. She actually was a beautiful young lady in the office. And I guess the men did a vote. Let's call it Taylor after this young lady. And that's what happened. Ready for the tow to Jacksonville for engine installation. Because they didn't have a crane big enough to do it, they could have gotten that solved. But they would never have gotten out of there. Adding the engine dropped it down in the water, it added a foot to the draft, or more to the draft. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. What happened to ST-40 Taylor? Lost in World War II. That's all I can find. I don't know anything else. There's nothing there. No details as to where, when, how many of the crew members were gone. Nothing. And I'll say right now, the actual records are hard to find. Why? The United States Army, in its infinite wisdom in 1951, destroyed all small ship laws. All small ship laws. Everything. They made the captains turn them in at the end of the war, and then 6 years later threw them away. Same thing applies to Victory and Liberty ship manifests. Can't find out which tug went on which boat. Can't be done. Thatcher. We had the early photographs, that's it. We don't know what happened to it at all. Totally gone. Disappeared from history. But we did verify with a lot of work, because I did find a good record from the Pacific Theater. Not a single one of these early boats went to the Pacific. One of the later ones did, but none of these did. Here's another shot. And I'm not sure how they did this, on top of a crane, I would think, or, very tall palm tree. Once again, November 43. There's a chance it's building on the right's there, but it's been totally redone. Kind of like the old story about, this is my father's axe, the head's been replaced 4 times, and the shaft 6 times. It's still my father's axe. Right? You heard that? Well, now you have. ST-42, wonderful photographs. We've got photographs, this one and several others are big enough to make posters out of, and we have for the museum yet to be. And Rick and I are going to compare notes on which one of us gets a real, there he is, a real museum first. Once again, 42 went to the Army, disappeared. Have no idea where it went. Could have been a war tug? Who knows? We know 40 was. 42, 41, disappeared. 43, Mother, apparently later known as Mars, was delivered and survived World War II to live a long commercial life in Portugal. Wasn't scrapped until 1997. And when I say scrapped, that doesn't necessarily mean it's gone. In many cases, scrapped or deleted from the register means it's out of the military, sold off, used for other purposes. So there could be a lot more of these out there that we haven't run down yet. Here she is, serving in Portugal in commercial trim. The next 4, 341, 342, 343, 344, they were all war tugs. Every one of those 4 went over. This photo was taken September 30th, 1943. Do I know which one is which? No. But the date tells me which 4 they are. SC-341 was a war tug. Survived World War II, ended up in Venezuela. It's probably still there, more or less. On the bottom right, you can see what's happened to her. She's just an old workhorse. May still be around. Everything's been changed, upper superstructure, additional steel around the sides. Forlorn, and Venezuela is not going to donate it to us, even if we had a way to get her back, which we don't. Here's ST-342, known as the Normandia. Was she actually a Normandy? Maybe, possibly, can't prove it. But functional, usable, yeah. Once again, Finland. ST-343, Famnen, converted into a pleasure craft. Really kind of looks neat. She was in the Finnish military, still today in Turku, Finland. 344, our most heroic boat. Without a doubt, was at D-Day +1. Mentioned several times in the archives and in an official story written by a guy named Stanton, Commander Stanton, about Task Force 128. Helped build the Mulberries at Omaha. Probably helped save people on December 7 when a troop ship, 2,500 soldiers, got hit a mine. And the tugs performed heroic actions. They weren't just building things. They saved people's lives. Not just our tugs, lots of tugs in World War II. 6 weeks later, July 20th, 1944, she hit a mine. And it's gone. I have information on one person that was on that boat. We don't know what happened to the rest. But I can tell you, having recently been down below decks of World War II here at Tug, you can't get out of there. And they're gone in 2 minutes. They're all steel. We lost 4 of the 16 that we know were over there in World War II, 25% loss ratio. That's the ones I know about. Probably more. SC-344 is part of Task Force 128. And you can see various tugs pushing the Phoenix units into place. These are big concrete things, 60 foot tall, 60 feet wide, 200 feet long. They were floated across to help in the dock construction at Omaha. I'm sure most of you have heard the story. It's a fantastic story. We got it done. And I'm proud to say that the land boat, at least one, was there. Probably others. We consider this a Normandy War tug. And our most heroic of all the tugs we know have history on. And I built this model. This thing's 46 inches long. And it's great. And that will end up in our museum along with all the other stuff. Now, I plead guilty to finding the hull that was already done. Thank you. I'm not that talented at building stuff. But it was far enough along that I looked at it and said, you know, I can finish this. And I did. So, by the way, this guy here is saying, Captain, Captain, there's a mine here, Captain. Here's another batch. The first 3, and this is odd, but it happened. The first 3 were built to 257 design, and then they built to a new design, 86 feet long, 650 horsepower. Wow. A little bigger, a little bit more powerful. Still all steel, still unstable, still top heavy. They had a Clark engine, MB6 diesel, or some of them had a Bush Seltzer diesel. And this is 477 being built. Okay, talk about your big engine. This is the new Clark engine. Only a few hundred were built. They only used them in 2 applications. Towards the end of the war, parts became unavailable. I've heard stories of calls in New York City where they had a guy in a car going from junkyard to junkyard trying to find spares. This is the engine that's sitting in Sweden today. I'll talk about that in a minute. We found one of these that apparently still works in a tug in Sweden, and it's been offered to us. All I need is a few $1,000s to get it home. And it only weighs 20 tons. Let's talk about Joe Richards and his book, Tug of War. Now, this is a short book. It's a fascinating story. Basically, this guy had no license. He went to New Orleans, heard they were looking for captains, and he had a little bit of navigation experience, had no marine license whatsoever. And he's being interviewed for the job to be master of this thing and to take it in the open ocean, basically unescorted, all the way from New Orleans, all the way to the Panama Canal, all the way back up to LA, and then to Hawaii. And he listened to the guy and basically said, "Can I have a chronometer?" "No, we can't afford that." And then the officer started looking at his background and said, "Well, you don't have a lot of qualification." And he basically said, "Is there a line over here behind me? How many fools do you think you're going to talk to in one day? Sign here." So off he went. He details throughout the book the incredible instability of these all-steel STs and lays out, basically, a conspiracy theory. Now, I've been hammered over this, and I said, look, I'm not saying this, read the book. He lays out the idea that many more STs were lost, never reported due to wartime secrecy. Now, I know our government would not keep something from us, ever. So, I think he didn't know what he was talking about. But if you believe him, or consider it possible, there is some logic and a little bit of evidence. Now, this is ST-474. This crew photo was taken in Cherbourg, France in early 1945. And I've got information because this was sent to me totally by accident from a lady who wanted me to enter some information on another tug. And she said, oh, by the way, he was on this tug as well. And I went, oh, it's a DeLand boat. Now, I got all this contacts, and I'm still getting contacts because I have a website where I've decided to list the history of all U.S. Army STs from World War II to Vietnam. And if you've got about a week, if you'd like to read World War II and history, go on my website. Everything can be pulled down, or you can read it right there on the site about all United States Army STs, and of course about everything I'm telling you tonight, and then some, because I do not have the time to go through all this. You guys would be skeletons if I tried. You'd be gone. So here's this marvelous crew photograph of ST-474. And the contact was because of the sinking of ST-75 off the Channel Islands off the coast of France that were taken over by the Germans very early. And a whole bunch of tugs got lost, that one got too close, got hit with artillery, and went down. He survived and ended up on this tug. And this was just sent to me totally by accident. How funny how things work. This gets better. About 6 months ago, I was contacted by a lady who had seen the website and said, oh, my father was master of ST-474. I said, you're kidding me. And I said, well, when I get the time, I'll send you all the photographs and history. And she did, and he was. They rotated crews. Even at the same time frame, there was 2 crews on these tugboats, in some cases 3. And if they had trouble with any of the crews, they would replace them with a whole new group. So there were crews constantly being rotated in. And the crews, I hate to use the word motley crew, but some of them were heroic, some of them were not so heroic. In fact, at one point, Commander Stanton, in his report on Task Force 128, says when they were in England getting ready for D-Day, they literally had patrol boats around the tugboats to keep people from deserting. Well, keep in mind, most of these people weren't military. They signed a contract to work, and they wouldn't let them leave. That's what happens in war sometimes. There were Army people, Coast Guard people, Naval Reserve people, merchant mariners, and civilians. And all these tugs, all mixed up. This was primarily Army, except look at the picture in the upper right-hand corner. And this was astonishing to me. German prisoners. They were looking for warm bodies at that time. These guys look like they're having a heck of a good time. They probably were compared to where they had been when it gets right down to it. And the bottom is a tire up at Cherbourg Harbor. Now I'm going to tell you a sad story. When I got the transcript of some of his letters, this boat, he went to Cherbourg, France on July 18th, 1944. It was there when ST-344 was sunk by the mine. He knew someone on that boat. He picked up the body and brought it back. How strange is that? I don't know the man's name that was killed. He was a warrant officer. That's all he says in the letter. I picked up my warrant officer friend and brought him home. Pretty emotional stuff. Now, ST-476 is 475, by the way, I skipped a number. Have no idea what happened to it. No photo. 476 is the Perla. This was a war tug as well. Oh, it's in Finland. So there are 3 boats in Finland. And this one's not too bad a shape. Here are the first of the Design 327 series being built into land. Here's an exterior shot. This became very popular. They built 186 of this design during the war by contractors all over the country. There was only one other firm that was inland, and they were on the Mississippi River. Everyone else was along the coast, as far as I can tell. Here's ST-477 on Lake Beresford. Very possible war tug, went to France in 1948. I say possible because even though it was in France, it might have been sold off in America and gone there after the World War. I can't tell. So I'm not going to make a statement I can't verify. Saudi Arabia got it, 51, who knows? But what's interesting is the machine gun up here. That's a 50 caliber Modus M2 machine gun. These boats, the Design 327 boats, were designed for 2 machine guns to be installed on the top of the wheelhouse. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that did not help the stability issue at all. And I need to mention that going back to the story about the captain who went from New Orleans all the way out to Hawaii, and that's a story you really ought to read. He had those installed in L.A. and he'd already had some close calls with a boat just about tipping over. And he looked at those. They installed 2 big pine boxes full of ammo, probably added 600, 700 pounds to the top of the boat, of an already top-heavy boat. So he got out of L.A., they pulled over. All right, machine guns in the hull, and everything else got tossed overboard. I'll deal with court-martial. But he lived. He got to Hawaii, 2,400 miles without a chronometer, in an all-steel tugboat. Whew. You go first. Tell me how it works out for you. ST-478 is now a houseboat, but it keeps the original superstructure. When we first found this photograph, I looked at it and said, there's something strange about this photo. It's got windows everywhere, even in the hull. Huh. She very well may have served at D-Day. The Transportation Museum in Fort Lee, Fort Eustis area, has on their website the 74 STs served at Normandy D-Day, starting 7 a.m. D-Day plus 1. They were out, many of them, and becoming a target, out offshore. They actually went to work the next day. But I made contact with the owner. He found the website. Oh, that website. What a wonderful thing. He sent me photographs. Look at this thing. He spared no expense turning it into a home. This guy owns about 6 restaurants in Paris. And he and his family live in this little tugboat. Got a couple of kids. And I have more photographs, but from one end to the other, he spent a fortune turning this into a home. Took everything out, started from scratch. Everyone's still awake? I don't see anybody fading yet. All right. ST-479 Tiger. You may have heard the stories about this one. This is the most original one we know of. It's got the original engine, original drivetrain still in it. Apparently the upper superstructure has been replaced with 30mm German armor. Supposedly it was destroyed by a German grenade and rebuilt. Can't verify anything other than the oral story. You know, I'd like to get over there and look for, you know, all the stamps on the metal, see if I can find some German markings, or Brewer, or whatever, you know. Of course, this didn't help the top-heavy nature of the boat, but it did survive. This is a boat that you probably heard about or read about in the papers. I was contacted by the marine architect involved with this. His lady friend owns a boat, and they were embarking on a $1 million refurbishment to turn it into a luxury yacht. And immediately, I emailed him back and said, and I talked to him on the phone too, I said, why are you doing this? What, you know, $1 million to buy a nice boat today. And I had to leave it because he offered us the drivetrain, the original engine, the propeller, all the stuff below decks. They're going to rip it all out. For the last year, no contact, haven't heard from him. No response to my emails. And he finally emailed me not 2 days ago, you're the first to hear of this, and said, okay, we've got the boat up here 300 kilometers north of not Copenhagen, yeah. Where in Sweden is, what's the capital of Sweden? I'm sorry. Thank you. Brain fart, we're getting old. Stockholm. He's got another place up there, and they're going to move ahead with this. Okay, fine. And quite frankly, even if they donated it, how would we get it back? Another issue altogether. But I priced a big old 40-foot container, which will take 40,000 pounds, and for $5,000, we can get it back. Not as much as I thought. So if it works out that the project doesn't interfere with other things that we'll talk about a little bit later, we will try to do that, because those things we can get back to the land and can save for posterity. An original engine, propeller, and drivetrain from World War II Deland warboat. Wow. To me, that's exciting. Probably the only one that runs left in the world. Yeah, we probably have to put it outside, which means it's not going to run very long. Nevertheless, it's a static display. Doesn't cost a lot of money to keep it up. We'll try to do it. Definitely in Europe, probably a D-Day. The Heritage says it was. Can't verify it yet. If it still runs right now, and he said it would, it's the only one left in the world to do so. All right, got a few stories for you. These are not DeLand stories, but they're entertaining nevertheless. ST-381, Carrier Pacific. This particular boat is a different design altogether. And keep in mind, the U.S. Army commandeered boats, built all kinds of stuff. They had a motley group of different boats. This one was in the Pacific. And they were around Mindanao in the Philippines. And, you know, they had a 9-foot draft, so they couldn't really get close to shore. They're out on the end of a pier. Well, here come the Japanese bombers. So they were targets. They were getting strafed all the time, and they only had their 250 calibers. So this captain went to the maintenance department and said, we need more guns. So they gave him 3 more. So this tug had 5 50 calibers on board and proceeded to shoot down 3 bombers. The only ST tug that had battle scars on their funnel. Pretty incredible story. And I read the actual letter where the captain sends a letter to everybody and tells them what happened, and it's really interesting. ST-772. Once again, I'm not sure the type. Small tugboat though, they were all small. In a book written by Gerald Reminick about the tugboats at D-Day, he talks about, at one point, the C-47s were coming across towing gliders, Waco gliders. And he said they must have had engine trouble or cold feet. I'm not making a judgment, just making a statement. They released early, so a lot of the gliders went straight into the water. At one point, they had saved more men, and they had no room on their tug for another human being. That's how many people this tugboat pulled out of the water. ST saved lives. Third story, the mystery ST of D-Day. This is a great one. This is in Commander Stanton's story about Task Force 128. They're all ready to go, and okay, we're going to be there in time to start D-Day +1. They start to come across, and he's on his boat with his binoculars looking back, and he starts counting ships. He's supposed to have 9 STs, including ST-344. He counts 10. So, they get on the flasher and communicate back to the commander in charge of the tugboats themselves. So why are there 10 tugs out there? And the guy literally took his boat up where he could yell across to the commander. Well, it's like this, Commander. Those boys wanted to come along, so I painted over the numbers and put new numbers on it. The Army will never figure it out. And he drifted back into column again. not wanting to hear what the commander had to say about that little bit. But you know, Commander Stanton gave him a one-word response, understood, and never said anything else about it. Those people were heroic. They didn't want to be left out. Okay. Now, this is part of the other story. This is why it gets really strange. Commander Stanton states that an ST was lost at D-Day. There's no record of it, other than in his narrative. Was that the mystery tug? I don't know. ST-247 hit some of the underwater obstructions coming in and made it to the beach. Stayed there 3 days while they repaired the hull. Is that the one he was talking about? Well, he probably would have seen that. So I'm not sure it's possible, but it's just one of those many, many mysteries around all these tugboats. The Edward J. Moran was a subchaser. By accident. They were working the waters between the United States and Cuba, and some of the other warboats around them started flashing information. There's a U-boat in the area. They ran over it and helped sink it. Accidentally came across the conning tower and were giving partial credit for sinking the submarine. How strange is that? All right, enough of the general ST stories, but those are the fun ones. Another batch, ST-672, 679. And The Ordeal of Convoy New York 119 by Charles Dana Gibson. This book's about $20 on Amazon or eBay. This batch of 8 tugs were produced between May and June of 1944. 2 of them capsized, these are 2 of the 4, and were lost in the North Atlantic in September of 1944. 676 and 677 actually survived, and they're the ones that should have gone down in this convoy. Notice how this boat is kind of getting ready to flip over? 60-foot waves. Now, when they started out, they did one of these things in the summer. What were they doing? Towing them at 200-foot intervals behind an LT. In some cases, 4 in a row. 200-foot intervals. They didn't have enough gas to go across on their own. And somebody said, well, that's how we'll do it. We'll save the space on the Victory ships and tow these things over. Now, can you imagine being a crewman volunteering for this? And they had between 10 and 12 on these tugs as they went across. Once they left, they averaged about 5.5 knots. 5.5 knots, you can walk faster than that. Took them about a month. Typical slow convoy took 2 weeks. Fast convoy could do it in 8 or 9 days. 3 STs flipped over. You're in a line, you get in a wave, the line goes askew, you go one side or the other, and when it tightens up, it pulls you over. The only reason our tug survived this is because the commander got a weather report, it's going to get worse. We're all dead. And there's an extraordinary story that goes with this. They were all destroyer escorts. That was the biggest thing out there. One of them started to crack in half. And they knew they were all going to die. But they had welding gear on board, and they were highly motivated. So they went up and welded everything up and survived. And later on, that ship was instrumental in helping all these tugs limp into France or England because the commander cut them loose. You're close enough now, good luck. And the USS Mason and its all-black crew, there's a surprise. The largest U.S. Navy warship to have an all-black crew. Of course, they had white officers. Saved everybody's bacon. They made a movie about it. And later on, 5 of these 8 would serve in combat zone of World War II. It was a disaster. 60-foot plus waves. And I couldn't even put the real number. The author said 80. It was a storm of the century kind of storm. Late September, October timeframe. This is one of the ones that capsized. We have no idea where. All it said was lost in World War II. And the old website got an email, and this guy said, we know exactly where that one is. It's on Tuskar Rock off the coast of Wales. And he sent me an Admiralty chart right there. We've known about that since it happened. And he gave me the details. 5 men died. The thing had hit the rock, and it was a tidal situation. They got stranded on the rock, tied them down. The rescue boats went out to try to save them. As the tide went up, apparently it had hole in the hull, had a hole in the hull, and flipped over. Captain and men, look at it. Amazing story. The crewmen tried, just the people in their rescue boats that had known about that rock for centuries, tried to save them and couldn't get to them. So, ST-673 went to Venezuela, was renamed Yeso Amway, later the Coronado. It's a leader from the register in '64. Probably scrapped, who knows, could be a houseboat down there. ST-64 is a world travel group. Starts out with 3 men killed trying to go to the war tug, and that was renamed the Odmar, and it joined one other land tug and 2 other STs in an epic voyage of 23,000 miles, counting all the back and forth and problems they had, to get to the Dutch East Indies. On their own power, bobbing and weaving the whole way. One guy was quoted as saying, most incredible thing I've ever done, but I wouldn't give it up. That was a brave man. She sank in Sumatra in 1960. Here she is. It took 7 months of bobbing and weaving to get there. And engine problems. They had the original engines. No parts. Probably got them at a bargain price. Well, you know what to say about a bargain. Sometimes you end up paying the price by the cheapest thing you can buy. We also, this is one of the ones that was lost to the sea. We know one person who was killed. The only known photo is right there. And it's funny, and ironic in a way, these 2 boats capsized in September. The 2 in the convoy managed to survive by being cut loose. Everyone okay? You can stand up and dance? Okay. Another one. This is the other one that was Sokalida that survived this incredibly long voyage. This made all the newspapers in 1948, by the way. 676. This tug was in convoy New York 119 and in the trip to the East Indies, Dutch East Indies. 677 went on to Greece and Italy to provide service, and it was sold off and scrapped in 1994. There's an actual shot of it in that convoy. This one is up in Rhode Island somewhere in that area. She was converted into a houseboat. I have no idea where. This is a model I built of ST-679, and that's the builder's plaque that I stumbled over in Milan. There are only 2 known to exist in the world. We have one. The other one is on the boat in Sweden, in Stockholm. He sent me a picture of it and said, yeah, that's it. Which verified, obviously, which boat that was. Okay. These were delivered at the very end of 1945. Too late to help actively, but it's interesting what happened to them. ST-839 went to the Pacific. Once again, a preparation for the invasion that never happened. The only land war boat that served in World War II in the Pacific, but only for a couple of months, if that. 840 ended up in Korea in 1950. I have a picture of it here in a second. Our only known Korean war boat. And the other 3 went to the Panama Canal at the end of the war and stayed there for quite some time. I was contacted by the grandson of the man that was on one of these boats. He's the only living crew member from this time frame. He's still alive. There's ST-840, 842, probably stayed in the United States, and is now sleeping with the fishes off of New Jersey. It was abandoned on a river, ignored for a decade, and finally sank. Can't ignore it anymore. It sank twice more before they finally got it out off the ocean to become part of an artificial reef. The Billy D. And this is Milt Esquivel, a gentleman who lives in Costa Rica, the only known living crew member of any DeLand World War II here at Tug. Now, the strange part about this is this model showed up, whoops, sorry. This model, ST-845, showed up at a Charleston flea market. And man emailed me, sent me a picture. So I found this in Charleston flea market. Would you like to have it for $35? Yeah. Somebody built it. We don't know who. Crew member, loved the boat, built this model. All hand built. And we have it for our collection. He actually served in all 3 boats. He rotated around as an engineer. He's got to be 88 today. Here's just on the bottom right is a picture when he served in the Army, United States Army. Then the 3 boats, 846, 847, 848, that were incomplete at the end of the war. They ended up going to Nationalist China, then known as Formosa, the UN in Tunisia. Don't know what happened to any of them. But on the bottom it says, destined to be here for France. No, didn't go to France.